Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weekend Recap this Thursday, the 13th of April, 2021. I am Steven Poletti. Joining me, as always, is producer extraordinaire Shaun Mathieson. Shaun, how are you?
I'm good, mate. You panicked me there for a second because you said Thursday, and I was like, oh, shit, I haven't gotten any of the stuff done
Did I
this
say
week.
Thursday?
It's fine. Like, if that's the one thing that we mess up, like, we're doing pretty well as far as the recap concerns. But it's been a huge week of football, of course. The W League coming to an end for another season. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the games and everything. But, yeah, I enjoyed this weekend's football offerings quite a bit. What about yourself, mate?
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. Apologies for us not coming to you last week. I was incredibly exhausted after my 26-hour road trip. And Shaun went away for the weekend, so he was also thoroughly exhausted. But we're back this week, and we have a lot to talk about in the world of Australian football. We have a grand final. The Matildas have a new sponsor. We have more Mexicans apparently interested in arriving in the league. We've got controversy galore, so we'll jump straight into it. Just a single W League match this week, and it was the aforementioned grand final. I'd like to forget this game happened, but we have to talk about it. 120th minute, Kyra Cooney cross, Olympiacos goal from the corner. Props to Jada Wyman for her performance in this game, which was the only reason it got to extra time and the only reason it got as late as it did. Sydney just couldn't seem to put anything together from an attacking standpoint. Like, even when they made breaks down the wings, they couldn't come up with any successful crossing, and that came back to bite them. They couldn't get it into the center properly. It was either being parried away by Gabby Garton, caught very easily by Gabby Garton, or the central defenders were just too good and just not letting anyone from Sydney near the ball when they were crossing it in. Shaun, what did you think of this game?
Yeah, I thought Victory got a game plan like 100% right. Like we spoke about throughout the course of our recaps throughout this season, that what might eventually undo Sydney is that they are effectively like a younger side, and they're very good when the transition is open and when there's space in behind for them to try and exploit with the likes of Vine and Seamson and Abini. Obviously, Vine didn't play in this game, which I think was a huge out for them. But then at the same time, I think Remy Seamson had probably a frustrating afternoon and evening where there wasn't a whole lot going right for her other than hold up play around halfway. Princess Abini got absolute lumps kicked out of her by Polly Dorian, which, like, you know, the dark arts in football are not always kind of praised. But, yeah, it was definitely, I think, the right approach to take. She ended up coming off before the 90 minutes was up. And Doran went on to have a pretty decent game well into extra time. I think where Victory held their line was very effective, like really preventing too much of that midfield play, getting players out early in transition, and really kind of clamping down that space. And once... If some teams, when they get out early, they're very effective, but then their second and third phase attacks aren't necessarily what they would want or what they need. And particularly in this game, it felt like if Sydney didn't get out quickly and had like a 3-on-3 or a numbers advantage on the counter-attack, then they weren't really creating too many overloads in wide areas to get balls into the box and all that sort of stuff. So I thought Victory set themselves up very well. I think they did, and you might disagree with me. You were in the stadium, so you can give us that proper fan atmosphere and reaction. But I think over the course of the 90 minutes, Victory probably did create more and probably had the more like actual goal chances. So again, yeah, as you mentioned, Jada Wyman was absolutely fantastic. History will look back harshly when they replay that goal on her performance, given that it does kind of sail over her head a little bit and she leads with one arm when maybe two would have kept it clear. But yeah, it was a very tense fixture. I think Victory just about shaded it across the 120 minutes, as much as it pains me to say. So yeah, congratulations to them and to Jeff Hopkins and all the fantastic work they put together this season.
Well, it's not just me thinking it. The stats actually back that up. So over the course of the 120 minutes, Sydney 14 shots, 4 of them only hitting on target, 30 shots in total for the Victory, 6 of them on target, and I'd say that there was a lot more danger shots than just the shots that were on target, because there were a lot that forced saves out of Jada Wyman that weren't necessarily going on target, but could have ended up in the back of the net had they found a player. Like, not kind of like that half cross, half shot on goal kind of thing is where a lot of Victory's chances came from, and Jada Wyman was forced into a lot of saves. Everything else You can see this. It's a victory, 12 fouls compared to Sydney's 5. So, and you mentioned that Princess Sabini was getting the crap kicked out of her down that wing, and that shows in the stats that there was a lot of easy fouls given away. 3 yellow cards apiece. It was very much an even game, and that does reflect itself in the scoreline. Despite the result, I actually really enjoyed this game. It was a tense 120 minutes of football, edge of your seat stuff. I at the end of the day, we got the 2 teams that deserve to be there the most, and that's all you want out of a grand final. We can make arguments as to whether or not the final system should exist, but the reality is it's what we have for now. One day I'd like to see it go, and I know a lot of fans echo that sentiment, but for now it's what we have. We've got the 2 best teams across the entire season battling it out, and you can't ask for much more than that.
Yeah, actually, before I go past the game, because we should focus on the game and all the work that everyone put it in, while Jada Wine was fantastic, I thought Claire Wheeler was excellent. I thought the battle between Ali Green and Lisa Devanna on the left-hand side for Sydney's defence and the left wing for... either wing really, because Devanna moves around a bit for Melbourne Victory, was excellent throughout the course of the match. For Victory, obviously, I think Cooney Cross is not long for the league, unfortunately. If she doesn't immediately head over to a North American team, she'll absolutely, I think, in a couple of months' time, be making her way to somewhere in Europe, such as her ability on the ball. Not to forget, she actually hit the crossbar about 15 minutes into the match, late on in the first half. Devanna also, headed the ball onto the corner, or, right on the corner of the upright and the crossbar. So Victory created their chances, half chances on another day that potentially would have gone in the 90-minute period. Well, it took 120 minutes, and it was really one of the last kicks of the game that kind of saw it finish. It, definitely, I think they created quite a bit. So looking at both sides, both Sydney FC and Melbourne Victory, they've both got good young cores. I think Ante Juric and Jeff Hopkins are probably going to be in those roles with those teams for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons. I don't really see any reason that they'd want to be going into other programs, given that Juric now transitions to some of his WMPL responsibilities, more on the WMPL in New South Wales on the channel this week. And then Jeff Hopkins at the same time, I think he's probably going to stay around Victory as long as Victory are willing to have him. So there's quite a bit of different stuff there that could potentially see both of these teams go on to become real forces over the next few seasons. Abini's still young. Seamson is another player that I think is probably destined to go overseas at some point, such as her talent and ability level. But even if she doesn't, if she stays around the Northern Beaches being a local Sydney girl, she's going to be in that Sydney FC lineup for the next 10 years if she feels like it. All the way through the midfield with the likes of Lowe. Polias probably doesn't have that much longer left in her, but Wheeler's only 23. The defensive lines are both incredibly young. Polly Doran's only 19, I think. The 2 all-white girls that are playing for Victory, Longo and Bunge, they're in their early 20s as well. So really good to see what that kind of narrative thread that's been running through the W League and A-League this season, which is young players getting an opportunity to really step up. We had a whole bunch of young players that we wouldn't have really looked at as being in Matilda's reckoning, like Kira Cooney-Cross, whoever else in that game that, potentially could be really pushing themselves to try and get involved in that Olympic squad, or potentially looking to get themselves involved in, the upcoming World Cup cycle. 2023 is looming around the corner. All those players are going to be 2 years further down the track, further into the development, a little bit, hopefully, more a complete player. We could really have seen in this final a lot of those different players that eventually make up that Matilda squad actually getting their real starts competing for silverware before they make those jumps overseas. So incredibly exciting stuff. Credit to both teams. It's always cruel when these things happen so late on in matches, but very exciting times for women's football into the future as well. You can take off your impartial host hat now. I will allow you to throw out whatever random stuff you've got. The match day experience, what did you rate the finals atmosphere? Obviously a few Victory Vikings travelled. Obviously there was good representation from the Cove. Shout out to Michelle Morris on the mic over the weekend as well. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from the game day experience?
Yeah, well done to MMTV, Michelle Morris, who did a fantastic job as capo of the Cove. As far as I'm aware, it's her first time actually leading the Cove proper. I know that she's been active at W League games by herself when she's been one of the few people there. But actually leading those who turned up is I'm very proud of her for that, because it's not an easy thing to do. I thought that the overall atmosphere was good. I do admit, I thought that the crowd number was bigger than it was, because the stadium looked full, and then I saw a disappointing 4,600 attendance, and this is not going to be a Sydney-based rant, although I am disappointed that more Sydney fans and just Sydney-siders in general didn't turn out for this. Sunday afternoon, tickets from $10. 4 p.m. kickoff, perfect. Middle of school holidays. And I'm going to apologise for language here, and Shaun edits this out. Great. Where the fuck was everyone? It's a perfect opportunity to go watch some great football at a great price. Why the fuck did people not turn up? It's pissed me off so much.
I won't edit anything out. We'll leave it in. But like, you definitely, as you get more violent with your gesturing, the desk starts to shake and it makes it look like you've created an earthquake on your end. But yeah, like absolutely, like really a setting that you would have thought if and this is one of my frustrations, and I've complained about this about Victory before. So to be fair, I should do the same thing about Sydney. If these clubs claim to be the biggest clubs in Australia, then these are the sort of games where they should be getting like a few thousand Cove members down to go and watch their team and support them to getting silverware to fill the trophy cabinet. Because if that's what they're going to call upon as being like, we are the, like, what are the stupid hashtags that Sydney FC use? The 5 times
Premiers, champions.
Yeah, like all that stuff with the 5s and the 4s and whatever else. This is where clubs really kind of lose me a little bit when they say we're the biggest club in the country, because if they're not able to go and support all of their teams, then they're not. Like, they're effectively just an A-League side at that point. Melbourne Victory, I've complained about before, the split between their A-League and W-League side on Twitter and social media. Sydney FC's gotten a little bit better, but like the champions and premiers stuff that they put up, it's not relating to the W League. And the W League, I think, arguably is now like probably just as successful as the men's competition, given the way that their season's gone with that premiership, with whatever else. Fascinating point that you kind of brought up about not wanting to see the final series. I don't mind the final series if it wasn't called Champions. Like the champion should be the end of season, top of the ladder team. I don't mind having an end of season cup tournament. That part for me is fine because it gives like a proper... Like, if we're not going to have an FFA Cup final because of the different contributions of different teams that happens at the very end of the season as the last weekend fixture, like we see with the English FA Cup in the UK, like I would love to see something that is like a final centerpiece or showpiece event to close out the season and move into our off-season period. So I actually don't mind having that final period. The tough part is that this W League fixturing, the way that it's been set up this week, these teams played each other like a week ago to try and decide that Premier's played, and then both had midweek fixtures to really try and get their position in the grand final, and then had to play each other again the week after. And now most of them, if you've been keeping up with different Twitters around NPL, New South Wales and Victoria, are heading straight back into their teams there. So there's a lot more commitment that's needed for the game in particular. There was more than one sign. Shout out to our little Macedonian Thunderbolt, Chrissy Tredesca, who worked her way into the Victory Vikings with the Expand the League stuff. And that's desperately like the thing it needs. I think, well, we've kind of talked about crowds, or we've talked about big clubs. Like, they need a bigger competition. They need a competition that either starts earlier or runs the gamut all the way through of a full home and away season. I saw some stuff this week, and you might be able to comment on it further based on what you've read, saying that they were looking to expand the league as soon as possible to 12 or 13 teams. I actually don't think that's the answer. I think what they first need to get to is you've got to play everyone home and away in a regular season before you can start adding more teams on it, because trying to jam more teams into a 12 or 13 game year, that's not sufficient for player development. That's not a lasting legacy, and we're supposed to be building towards all that stuff as our World Cup legacy.
So my interpretation of what came out midweek was that in terms of expansion, it looks like it's going to be every A-League team is going to have a W-League team, which ironically would create more W-League teams than it would A-League teams because you had Canberra United in there. So I can imagine there's going to be 1 or 2 A-League teams that doesn't have a W-League team associated with it, which is fine. It's not something that should be forced on any club that may not have the stability to do so. Looking at someone like the Central Coast Mariners, and we'll talk about the news that came out from them today later on after we wrapped up all the A-League stuff. So ideally 12 teams, home and away, that's 22 game season plus finals. You can have a proper top 6, get your finals going in, whatever. I'm more than happy to start with home and away first with our current lot of teams and then move up. But as I said, my understanding was that it's going to be home and away, 12 teams. And they kind of want to go, they basically want to go big or go home with this. And I don't know, if it's at the point where that's what the APL wants, where it's either we do it all or we do none, I'd rather them do it all and I don't want to say crash and burn miserably, but it does have the potential to do that if you just go straight from 0 to 60, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And like the longer that it goes without us hearing about the next TV rights deal, I think the more likely it becomes that the W League and A League both have like September start dates again. And if they do that, that's in the off season of most NPL competitions, excluding finals and whatever else, where potentially you can still get those 13, 14 teams. What I'd love to see is it jump to immediately to 14, and the teams that come in for the W League are progressive over the next few years, and we'll confirm it here first, just in case we're right and can look back like we're heroes. But Canberra United confirmed for the A League to match their W League franchise, and then we'll talk maybe a little bit more about Gold Coast United potentially working their way back into the league somehow, or Central Coast or whatever else. But yeah, like that's the way that I'd want to see it go, like a September start date with a view that maybe it is just 12 teams next season, and then they're making the jump within 18 months, within 2 years for the World Cup to have full 14 and 14 representation across the A-League and W League, and a full home and away season of 28 games for both, or 26 games, apologies, it would be. Even for the A-League, and we might talk through this more when we get towards the end of the segment for the A-League itself, playing teams 3 times doesn't really serve any purpose anymore if you're not creating like lucrative fixtures, or they're not like high-end battles in the table. In reality, it's just more of a logistical nightmare. But if we had a flat like home and away season, and you've got 1 game home, 1 game away, I think that's going to help balance out the league, and I think it's going to help long-term fan bases like continue to grow and continue to develop. Away trips this season, W League and A League, have been really tough because we're only seeing like a month in advance with like different COVID restrictions and whatever else. But if we knew like at the start of a season exactly when our like 1 trip away to play Sydney is, it's probably a lot easier for fans then to go and do that away trip and have that proper experience. It's probably a lot easier for you to not have to drive 26 freaking hours down to Melbourne. You can actually get...
Yes, I can vouch for doing last minute away trips.
You can absolutely like then go and book your Tiger Air flights 3 months in advance. Like I think that's something as that both leagues mature, they really need to get to, so that we've got that stability, so that we know exactly what the season's going to look like. We know we've got home trips, away trips, whatever else, and that we're actually going to really start working towards being a consistent top tier football league. And the pathways, that's the frustrating thing about football, and particularly about women's football. Like, we've looked at the way that the Women's Super League in the UK has effectively sprung up over the last 18 months, really. Like, before that, there was no real UK representation as far as the elite tiers of football were concerned. Yes, they had leagues and whatever else, but they've really picked up with their international recruitment. They've really started to put more of a focus on the women's football in the UK itself. It wouldn't take that much for the W League to get to the same level, because the architecture is already there within the A-League itself. Potentially, and people that play in like regional competitions might know what I'm talking about here, potentially clubs travel and play other clubs on a match day. So if you're playing Sydney, if Sydney and Victory are playing each other in the W League, then they're also playing that weekend in the A League. They're also playing that weekend in the Youth League, and a club travels to try and work around some of that logistical concern and that logistical nightmare. I know people hate double headers, and I'm sorry if you're part of our W League audiences, that is part of that group. But like, there's a million different ways that we could approach stuff to try and get both the A-League and W League longer seasons and more consistent seasons. And if anything, we've learned from the last 12 weeks, effectively 13 weeks of W League action, is that they desperately need more football and more exposure to football and more access to football for the public, so that we are building towards the 2023 World Cup, not trying to coast on the momentum after it's happened.
Yeah, that's it's interesting you mentioned that. Not waiting for the momentum of the 2023 World Cup, because there's been a few criticisms I've seen on soccer Twitter this week, and I know soccer Twitter's not the be all to end all, and I know soccer Twitter likes to blow things out of proportion. And again, more on that later on in the show, because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about in that if we have time. Australian football and the Football Australia tends to be reactive as opposed to proactive. Is generally as a sentiment shared amongst some fans, and I think with all this talk of expansion, it's going to be proactive, which is good, and it's going to be a change from the way the FA usually does things, and I'm looking all forward to that. You mentioned the TV rights deal; that's going to be key in all of this. I absolutely love the fact that now the international fixtures are no longer bundled in with the A-League and the W League, so it allows for a potential split of an audience across more channels, maybe. So it could be Channel 10 gets the international games, and it could be, say, Stan Sport has the A-League and the W League. Or maybe everyone gets everything. But I think it creates a lot of potential to create added value coming into the game.
I think
which is what we need at the moment.
Yeah, I think the only way that I'll be happy with that decision is if the internationals end up on free to air and then the A-League, W League is on a paid service to help fund it. Like, there's no scenario where I could see two different paid services having rights to two different games and two different broadcast partnerships and whatever else, and it benefiting the Australian fan base, which, regardless of what everybody thinks, like about metrics and sponsorship and all that sort of shit, like the fan base and the passion of the fan base and the loyalty of the fan base is the greatest strength that football has in this country. If it ends up that, like, the international games go to Optus Sport and then the A-League's on Stan, like, that'll drive everybody nuts. And I think you'll end up alienating a lot of the players a lot of the fans who may not necessarily care about international fixtures anymore unless they're happening in their town and unless they can physically go to it, because the infrequency of those fixtures, and I don't want to say the lack of quality because that's not 100% fair on our teams, but, like, is anyone really going to stay up till 5 a.m. and pay $15 a month to watch on Optus Sport, like Australia qualify for the Asian Cup against Vietnam? Probably not. So, how do we try and make that into like a value-added proposition? For me, that would have been trying to tie and bundle all of our football packages together. But if there are, free-to-air broadcasters that are willing to broadcast the Socceroos and Matildas fixtures, trying to leverage that for a big push towards getting the World Cup rights in 2023, then fantastic. Like, more of that. If SBS could get it and give themselves like a consistent base of international and youth football to present, we know they have a history with that. The World Game's not what it used to be, but, if they're going to try and work back towards that, fantastic. If it is someone like Ted, who, again, doesn't have a lot of cash, that's great. But I think for the A-League and W League, they'll need a paid service because they will need to recover quite a bit of the money that they've effectively lost in both fan goodwill and registration rights and all that sort of stuff, and the continued impacts of COVID-19 throughout the course of a season that they haven't really had over the last 12 months or so. And I think the W League will be a key piece of that because it will be leveraged as the first stepping stone towards that World Cup competition on home soil.
Yeah, so you're in a scenario where you have the anti-siphoning list, and the anti-siphoning list dictates basically what sport has to be offered to a free-to-air network first before a paid service, for the most part, specifically Foxtel, before they can take their shot at it if they want it. Although with all the number of streaming services and all the extra players in the market now, that creates more of a demand. But so on the anti-siphoning list, as it relates to Australian football, all home international fixtures for the Socceroos must be on free-to-air. But that's it. Nothing about the Matildas, nothing about the Olyroos, nothing about the youth teams, the under-17s. The all World Cup games involving Australia must be offered to a free-to-air service first. Now, that hasn't been so much of a problem because SBS takes the rights to the World Cup anyway. And the FIFA World Cup final must be on free-to-air.
Well, so you might be able to correct me on this or clarify this for me. Do they have to be live?
Yes, I believe it has to be live. If it's on home soil, it has to be live.
Yeah, I think yeah. So where this is confusing me, right? I can't remember what the original. So last World Cup, obviously, 2018, the plan was that replays were going to be on SBS and the live games were going to be on Optus Sport, and that was the split between the divide, that they were still going to be on free-to-air, but you couldn't watch it along live until you got Optus. But then Optus obviously had I can't remember what the original setup was for the final, though, if the final was going to be live on SBS as well, which is where I'm a bit lost.
So it was one game a day on SBS, all Australian games on SBS, and every game from the round of 16. It was the round of 16 of the quarterfinals onwards on SBS, and everything was being broadcast live on Optus Sport. Right. So effectively, you were watching two broadcasts of the same game, or you had access to two broadcasts of the same game, whether that for the games that were being shown on SBS live. I was able to avoid all of that kerfuffle, thankfully. I was in the United States at the time, so I got crystal clear coverage of everything, so I was happy. But that's a story for another day. So you're looking at a scenario where even if it's only home, like let's just say team or a broadcaster only wants the home fixtures, then that might be fine, and you lump the international you lump the overseas international games in with the A League and the W League deal. So maybe Stan, and I'm going to use Stan Sport as the example here because it's the one name that's been constant throughout every single article that's been mentioned with the TV rights. Is you give them the A League, the W League, and you give them the international away fixtures, and maybe someone like SBS has the home fixtures. Or maybe Channel 9 wants a lot. Who knows? They want the lot for Stan Sport with, just like they have with the rugby, one game a week on free-to-wear from the A-League and the W-League, and all international fixtures live on a Network 9 channel, whatever that is. Probably 9 Gem, because, let's face it, that's where they're putting the rugby at the moment, so that's probably where they're going to put football as well, but at least it's on free-to-wear.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I don't know. There's the part of me, like as a fan, that I just want all my football to be in one spot. I don't want it to be Fox Sports or KO or anything to do with Murdoch Media Empire, because they clearly don't give a shit about the game. And I know we haven't mentioned it. We weren't going to give too much credence to it. But again, they cut away from the middle of Angie Beard's speech during the broadcast to go to the warm-up for the next A-League game, which no one really gave a shit about. And in the end was a fairly dire affair anyway. But enough about that. My one concern will be is that we'll get a quality and a level of production and a knowledge of the game associated with the A-League and W-League, because our best commentators, our best broadcast personnel, our best cameramen, whatever else, are working on that week in, week out. And then we'll get another scenario where there's a different broadcast crew, a different presentation, a different commentary group that is presenting the international fixtures that isn't quite as high, or because they're doing it once every 3 months, or because they're only broadcasting from remote random locations, or it's via somebody else's newsfeed or something like that. The brave option for me would have been for Football Australia to decide they were going to be their own broadcast partner, and they would develop that, in-house camera crew to go and film the games and have the capacity to broadcast them live, and then sell off individual rights to individual games. For the internationals, the A-League, W-League stuff, we'll see how it plays out. But it's exciting times that we're getting to have these conversations, and that we are secure in the knowledge that we're probably not going to get stuck into Fox Sports, monopoly over football for the last kind of 15, 16 years.
Well, for all we know, that stuff's happening behind the scenes. We don't know, and that's the great thing about it, is all these conversations could be happening. The FA could be looking at their own OTT service, more money. So that aspect is not I don't look forward to paying yet another subscription fee to a streaming service. But that's one option that could be being looked at.
If they can find a way to, they've got the MyFootball Live app, which is the best way to watch football. It's $6.99 a month on the App Store, wherever you've got. If they can find a way to develop in that app the ability to cast it to a TV, they are sorted. That's all they need.
I think the only thing that's stopping them from having the Chromecast ability at the moment is the Fox Sports contract.
Absolutely. And look, to be honest, I don't think we're going to hear about this before the A-League season's over. I think this will be a news story that breaks during the off-season, because can you imagine, Fox Sports gives so little a shit about their presentation at the moment. Can you imagine how terrible they'd be if they knew that they weren't going to broadcast next season? I think that's the one thing that kind of keeps them going, is that there is this carrot that maybe they will get the broadcast rights on a cheap deal next season, or they will eventually get the World Cup. Imagine if from here on out they knew that they weren't going to be broadcasting any more A-League football, or football at all, beyond the end of this season, beyond June. I just can't. Games will disappear. We'll get 90 minutes of Tuba Guy instead of 6 seconds. It'll be ridiculous for the rest of the year. But yeah, it's exciting to see that we are moving away from that, and hopefully it is good news in the next few weeks.
You heard it from here, Sean. You heard it from Sean here first. The second the full-time whistle blows in the grand final, we're going to have the TV deal for next season. Yeah,
it'll be on Reserve Team YouTube channel, and I'll be late to it, and we'll have random weeks where we don't show up and whatever else, but it'll be fun.
Well, we could always bid for the rights. You never know. I'm sure Rose has money floating around somewhere.
We shall see. We shall see.
We shall see, indeed. What we might do is, rather than jump straight into the A-League now, we might, and we don't have a screen for this, so we'll go back to the multicam, as Sean's just pulled up. We might talk about some of the headlines that have come out this week, just to give a little break between everything that's gone on. So, the Matildas have a new sponsor. Sponsoring women's football is Commonwealth Bank. This deal is reported to be a very long deal. Football Australia has announced that it's part of a 15-year plan to invest in the future of football in this country. This makes Commonwealth Bank one of, if not the largest, supporter of women's sport in this country, given how much they do to women's cricket. Shaun, what are your thoughts on this deal?
So I think they are also going to sponsor the Socceroos, but a lot of the press conference stuff today was specifically relating to elevating women's football and trying to get that up there. So you kind of touched on cricket, and this will be the only time we ever mention cricket on this channel because I let you get away with enough hockey and whatever North American references every week. But cricket's where I draw the line. They have done a great job. Like, they have some very aggressive like marketing and advertisement stuff during the Australian summer relating to cricket and relating to, like, you know, female participation. And this is not the right tagline, but it was something along the lines of like, this girl plays, or something like that. Elise Perry was very heavily focused on it. So they do have a good track record in the Australian market of developing certain sports and really pushing them as much as they can through either additional ad revenue or naming rights or whatever else. I will be thrilled, and shout out to Mikey Mifsud over on Twitter, if they can get away from the Matildas logo being the Westfield Matildas logo and the ball with the wraparound on it. And like when we're playing international fixtures, to show like our coat of arms the way that Germany does, the way that all the other nations do around the world. For whatever reason, ours is a company logo. So if they can get away from that, that'd be fantastic. But you know, like, it's good to have this long-term deal in place. It's good that it's specifically focused around, I think it's Matildas, Junior Matildas, Socceroos, Young Socceroos, and I didn't actually see anything on the Olyroos, which could be interesting. Olyroos are a kind of a weird silo because they don't have they're not part of the same kit deals. They wear the kit that, you know, is provided for the Australian Olympic team. They're not broadcast under the same rights because that broadcast goes to whoever the Olympics broadcast provider is. It'll be very interesting to see if, once the Olympics come around, if Commonwealth is actually associated with it in any way. But still super exciting. I think they're seeing an opportunity where they can look at it and think, okay, in 2 years' time, we've got a global event taking place in Australia and New Zealand where we operate. How often can we get our label, our badge, our marketing, our logo on things in the build up to that, as more and more eyes from around the world start looking at us? One of the fascinating parts is that one of the big things that was talked about when the Lowy era came to an end, Frank and then Steven, was that their connections through Westfield were what brought in so much of the sponsorship and marketing revenue for the leagues itself and for the Matildas and Socceroos, that none of these opportunities were supposed to be able to happen. And it has been pretty barren for the last couple of years. Hyundai left after their partnership ended. Westfield have kind of stuck around the Matildas specifically, but now bringing in someone like Commonwealth who can really build the league around, or build those teams around, we just need to get someone to make that same commitment to the A-League and W-League. If we do that, effectively, most of our sponsorship revenue is secure for the next few seasons. So fantastic to get it at that international level. Fingers, toes, arms, eyes, ears crossed that we can get it for the domestic game as well. That's really the last little piece that we're missing at the moment.
I think we'll get more on that once the TV deal comes to light, just because we'll have an idea of when the season's going to actually be broadcast. You don't want to sign up one sponsor who thinks they're getting a summer game, where they're basically going to have clear air of the sporting market outside of cricket, and then, it's a winter game and you're going to be hidden behind league and AFL, or vice versa. So I think we'll know more on that once the TV deal's been sorted. Personally, I just want to see Matildas on the side of my ATMs. That's all I want to see. I just want to see Matildas plastered all over the CommBank ATMs, especially in the lead up to the World Cup. I think that'll be fantastic to watch. Central Coast Mariners. We have an English invasion, reportedly. A report was broken this morning that Manchester United are in talks to buy the Central Coast Mariners and relocate them to Sydney. I welcome any form of investment into the league, but relocation has to be out of the question. We cannot afford to lose the Central Coast. That community club, that community base, that community spirit that the Mariners bring, the only professional sporting team on the Central Coast. It took, 15 odd years to get the North Sydney Bears off the seats at Central Coast Stadium. It feels like now it is the Mariners' home, more so than it ever has before, especially with how well the Mariners are doing. We need to keep the Mariners on the coast. If Man United are happy to buy the Mariners, or whoever's interested in buying the Mariners is prepared to keep it on the coast, then I welcome all commitments. I did see another report this afternoon broken by ESPN that someone at the Mariners had denied that this had happened and that this was incorrect information that had spilled out, reported by, I think it was Don Bossie this morning for the Sydney Morning Herald, and I should have checked that before I went into this. But yeah, so I don't know where the truth in all this lies. What are your thoughts, Shaun?
I don't not like Don Bossie. I need to preface this early. I know he's a friend of people on the channel. I know he's written some great stuff in the past, but it's so irresponsible to put out articles that are based on speculation and reported as fact, which drives me nuts because it happens again and again and again by people in Australian football media. And I know it's tough in Australian football media and opportunity is limited, and you're probably driven to put stuff out there that's going to get clicks and going to get people talking and going to get that engagement. But if you've seen Robbie Slater's Twitter over the last few weeks, the amount of just unfounded speculation that gets more on him to come. More on him to come. But unfounded speculation about clubs talking to managers and the Wanderers trying to steal Newcastle's players. And now we've got another one today where if you've read Dominic Bossie's article, and he's a very good writer, don't take anything away from the quality of his work, but it is unfounded. There is no comment from Manchester United. There is no comment from Central Coast Mariners. The pure aligning factor is that Mike Phelan, one of the assistant managers who you might have seen a great image of staring into the sky in the background of a Man United match this week, he has a sporting director role at Central Coast where he advises them on different sporting aspects. That's it. That's the link. There's no discussion with the Glazers, who actually own Manchester United, expanding their football portfolio. There's no quotes from Manchester United that are looking to build. And to be honest, if they were looking to build a CFG-style network, I don't think they'd start in Australia. I don't think they'd be starting in Sydney or the Central Coast more specifically. And then immediately Sean Millercamp, the CEO of Central Coast Mariners, came out and said, we've had discussions with dozens of clubs. This is purely speculation and isn't fact and shouldn't distract anyone from anything. So I think there's an element of irresponsible reporting, and I get why you do it and I get why you drive that engagement. But to not present this with a disclaimer down the bottom that says Manchester United were unavailable for comment, Central Coast Mariners were unavailable for comment, then you are purely just putting stuff out there into the ether. And this happens every couple of years, and usually it's Fox Sports that are the main culprits, and I'm surprised it was actually Bossie this time, where you may remember Melbourne Victory were going to get bought by the Fenway Sports Group after they played that friendly against each other at the MCG, and 80,000 fans saying you'll never walk alone. That was the first story that came out the next day, was that Liverpool were thrilled and wanted to buy Melbourne Victory. It's come up before, Manchester City had a partnership with Perth Glory prior to their acquisition of the CFG group. Charlton had a memorandum of understanding or something with New Zealand Knights. Mariners have had partnerships with Everton and Sheffield United in the past. So these things aren't new, those relationships between those two areas of the world. But to report it as being anything other than speculative at this point is very irresponsible. And if you remember back, I'm a Melbourne Heart fan, and I was a member all the way through. We weren't told anything about the club being taken over at any point by the club themselves. And really, I don't know how good your memory is with this portion. It happened in the blink of an eye. I think there were rumours about a week before, and by the end of that week, it was announced. That was very much under wraps. And that's the way contract negotiations work. That's the way purchases work. That you don't get to go and talk about things that you're working on ahead of time or in advance of time or whatever else. You sign non-disclosure agreements. These things are very tightly wound and tightly kept. We know Mike Charlesworth, the owner, is based in the UK. We know he's been shopping the club around for the better part of 3 years, where he's been trying to find people that might be willing to purchase it. So yeah, for me, it's entirely unfounded. No Mariners fan should be concerned or worried. The fascinating part, and I'm not sure if you've seen this yet because I know you've been at work this evening, is that we started the day with that report saying that Manchester United was going to pip high in the club and moving them to North Sydney. And we ended the day with Vince Regari bringing out an article saying that actually there's a US-based millionaire and his partner who previously had been involved with Gold Coast United who were looking to purchase the licence and move them to Gold Coast United, which for me potentially has a bit more realism because those businessmen have been involved in the league before. They are potentially looking to get football back to the Gold Coast death pit as far as Australian sports is concerned, because no one goes out there to watch anything. But it's such an Australian football thing that we start a day with one story about one team moving to Sydney and then finish the day with that same team being bought out and the franchise license going elsewhere. I tweeted and I'm not trying to plug my own Twitter here, even though you can see the handle on the screen at the moment, I tweeted out that if there are legitimate interest from parties like Manchester United, like whatever else, why isn't Football Australia reaching out to them to give them new licenses? Shout out to Brian Gibson, who I think had tweet of the day where he said a new license for Tasmania Red Devils, or Tasmania United, the Red Devils and the logo and all that sort of stuff, as a brand new license and a 13th expansion club for the league. Like, that would be fantastic. Go and get Manchester United to build their own club from scratch in that market that they get also themselves, that has like the highest representation by state of people playing the game at the moment. So like it was a frustrating day for me on Twitter, but I kind of bit my tongue through most of it. I'd be very I should commit to something. Like, I'll shave my head if it ends up being that Manchester United buy Central Coast Mariners and at the same time try and move them. I think it's purely unfounded, purely speculative, and really just driven to drive conversations like the one you and I are having. But I've gone on a rant, so by all means, let me know your thoughts.
I love the idea of it being Tasmania, and throw Canberra in there for national competition. The teams that, or the cities that we, or at least I felt should have been 11 and 12 would be 13 and 14. Then the only state not represented is Darwin, and I don't want to seem like I'm shitting on Darwin here, but no one gives a shit about Darwin.
Realistically, and apologies to our Darwin fans, but like a summer competition can never work in Darwin because of the climate.
Yeah, it can't. And I'm not going to go as far as Lucy Zelich in disparaging the great city of Darwin, but it's not the best place to be around. I'm trying to use my words carefully here. I think I find it ironic that it's like Manchester United, Central Coast Mariners, are moving to Sydney. Sydney United and the colours red and black. I've never heard of that in Sydney before. Have you?
Look, I don't. Again, like, I just don't put any validity to it, and I don't. If you were a millionaire or a billionaire in the case of the Glazer family, and you were going to try and create a second Manchester United club with United, like, you're not looking at Gosford. Like, if you've got all the resources in the world to go and get like a new franchise, they'd be looking at the MLS, they'd be looking in China, like they'd be looking somewhere maybe even in Africa to like try and get a recruitment network in that area. But like, there's no chance that they're looking at Gosford. It is purely the link of Mike Phelan. That's the only reason this story exists.
And to be honest, if you've got that kind of money, you're going after Sydney FC, you're going after the Wanderers, you're going after Victory. You're not touching Central Coast, who have had one good season in the last 7.
Or if you want me to lowball a segue for you, you'd go and look at like a Los Angeles type market and some of the players that they might have available there.
Beautiful, beautiful segue. And I had my own different segue planned.
What was your one? Was your one better?
My one was soccer Twitter blowing things out of proportion. It's not like we ever do that, especially when it relates to certain Mexican players. So as Shaun very much teed me up off the softball there, I am a LAFC fan. The jersey says it all here. Los Angeles Football Club. Carlos Vela this week coming out and saying that he has an interest in potentially playing in Australia, or at least visiting Australia. He never specifically said he wanted to play in Australia. So what does soccer Twitter do? Naturally, go nuts. And I am on the Carlos Vela to the A-League hype train. In fact, I'm leading the train. I don't care what anybody else says. I'm leading this train. There should be proof on the reserve team channel in either a podcast appearance or the Sydney FC season preview for this. Not to toot my own horn, but I've got to do it sometime. Carlos Vela is a fantastic player. He's absolutely torn up MLS since he's been there. He's still in his early 30s. I absolutely love the potential of him coming, and because he would destroy the A-League. He would just rip through teams at will. Where I think you have the problem with Carlos Vela to the A-League is the financial side of it. I think you need to get him here. However, now I don't know if this FFA War Chest Marquee Fund, whatever it is, still exists, but it would take the entirety of the Marquee Fund plus wages on top of the clubs. So I realistically think there's only 4 teams that would be in the running for Carlos Vela, because his reported wage in 2019 was 4.5 million US dollars, and there was also reports that number got up to over 6 million after the bonuses and guarantees.
It's 5.9 Australian, 5.9 million Australian, if you're curious.
Yep. So almost 6 million Australian dollars, double what the reported war chest is. So that's a lot of money. Now, he was coming off the back of a World Cup campaign when he signed with LAFC, or was going into a World Cup campaign. I don't remember if he signed at the start of the 2018 season. I really should have looked this up. But anyway, you're looking at a hell of a lot of money for a player. Like, he's going to at least command 4 million Australian dollars.
The comparison or the parallel to draw is that ADP, Alessandro Del Piero, was believed to be on about 2 million a year during his contract at Sydney FC. So it was more than double like the highest wage that I think's ever been paid in the A-League.
Now, what that would do though is I think you get that 4 million back almost immediately. Not immediately, but you would make that back over a season. So let's say Carlos Vela signs for next season, hypothetically. This is all hypothetical here. We've shown what the Mexican fan base can do with Ulises Davila. Carlos Vela would do at least double that. There would be Mexican fans in every city coming out to see Carlos Vela. He would tear the league apart. Not necessarily Del Piero-esque, because he didn't quite have that higher European echelon. But you'd see a lot. You'd see fans turning up in every state just to watch Carlos Vela play. You would get your money back in spades. Now, I'm with the financials. The 4 clubs I think that would even have half a chance to do it. And I say half a chance because it's ridiculous money. I'm going to start at the bottom of this top 4. So I think Melbourne City is at the bottom. And I only say that because Melbourne City have or the City Football Group, there's a lot of paychecks that need to be signed off on and everything. And I don't think there's the preparedness from the City Football Group to splash $4 million on a marquee like Carlos Vela. Because we saw it was David Villa. We saw the way that turned out. We didn't even get all the games from David Villa. So I think you then move on to the Victory. And the only reason I've got the 2 Melbourne teams so low is because Victory's in a shambles. I don't think Victory, they have the finances, but I think it would be bad for the club to go out and get Vela, just because there's so many other areas they need to address first, rather than throwing $4 million at a single player for a season. I then go to the Wanderers and Sydney FC. I have these 2 teams tied, just because the money's there. I think he would fit in incredibly well with both clubs. Look, my Sydney bias is going to show. I so want Carlos Vela in Sky Blue, just so I have more of an excuse to go watch Sydney every week and travel around the country to watch them. I don't want to see him at Wanderers. I don't want to see him at Victory. But that's me showing my biasness. I want Carlos Vela in the league any way it can happen. But I've talked long enough about the LAFC superstar. Shaun, how much do you know about Carlos Vela, and what did you think of about this quote and the way that Soccer Twitter blew it up?
Crazily enough, I actually saw him play when he was at Arsenal way back in the day, back when I was living over there in the early 2010s. So, yeah, great player. Never really looked much other than potential in Europe, but I was obviously gone to another level. Settled a little bit in Spain later on in his career, and then he's really gone to another level in the MLS. I don't rate the MLS as being as good defensively as the A-League. I think going forward they might be a bit better, but physicality is obviously what Australians do very well. Athletes, we develop it a dime a dozen across our different sporting codes, so I don't know if you would perhaps get the same figures and same numbers. Different to you, Melbourne City won't get him because that's not the Melbourne City model. That's not what they're looking to do. They'd rather play a young player in that position or get an old, experienced ex-Premier League head for next to no wages.
So the only reason I put Melbourne City at 4 as opposed to the other teams is simply because of the financial backing of the City Football Group, which I know they won't spend. Melbourne
Victory won't get him, because if they spend $4.5 million on a player's wages when they don't have a training base and don't have an academy facility, they will have fans saying the line's been crossed at every single one of their training sessions. That's not what they need right now. Western Sydney, I don't think can afford him, and I think they're also looking towards their academy structure. Sydney FC, I could see doing it. I think David Tratkovenko, at many different points throughout his tenure, has put his money where his mouth is, but I think he's been quite open and honest about, after the Del Piero signing, that's not how they want to really kind of plan for that team. They'd rather have a balanced squad of a variety of different players getting paid $300,000 a year than, one specific player going after that amount of money. And to be fair, Sydney FC's most successful on-field period is the period immediately after the Del Piero era, that 2015 to today type period. So I don't think they're going to want to get away from that. The one that I don't think you mentioned is Western United. I could 100% see them doing it if Diamante retires.
I didn't do my complete 12 to 1 list, which I actually worked out this morning on my way to work because I got to do something in the car other than listen to podcasts. I had Western United and MacArthur in that 5-6 spot. MacArthur, because they're set to get, and I don't know if this is still the case, but when they signed or paid the expansion fee, they were still set to get most of that back. With the Fox Sports deal falling apart, I don't know if that's the case, but that was still reported to be a 19 million fee paid, roughly 15 million back. You could probably afford to invest 30% of that in a single player, as long as you could work it around the salary cap, and I think you could. I think the FA would and the APL would be like, look, we can get this player in, you got the money, we'll find a way to work it out, even if, dispensations given to the other teams in the cap, an extra couple of $100,000 to offset it. Western United, I think it's strictly a financial thing. I think it's the fact that, and we've talked about the stadium ad nauseum. The fact that the funding for the stadium is supposed to come from them selling off the land around the proposed built stadium. And as far as I'm aware, they still haven't sold off any of that land. So I don't know. On paper, they should have money, but the reality is that none of it's liquid, and it could take a long time to turn that paper money into liquid money. And I think, and again, this could be next season, it could be the season after, it could be 2 seasons. It might never happen, but it's something that if you're looking at Carlos Vela next season, I don't know how realistic it is for Western United to turn paper money into liquid money in the span of the next... Well, it would have to be the January transfer window, so 6 months.
So the reason why I think Western United are the most likely is that Lou Steeker's on the board, who is a player agent. If anyone's going to negotiate such a deal, it would probably be him. And he'd probably do it while waiving his agent fee because he's such a kind, compassionate guy about dragging dead football licenses to dead areas. And I think Western United's biggest problem isn't even necessarily the stadium. I think it's their fan engagement. And I think if they can guarantee themselves 100 Mexican internationals coming and watching all their games in Melbourne, and then by way of that, ingratiating them into their active support and then growing the Western Service crew, shout out to Leb Trimble and Michael Ireland and all those boys, they would be the most likely, I think, to want to go after that marquee model. I don't think in the league itself there are that many teams that actually want marquee players anymore. I think there are teams that want proven talent, or they want reliability, or they want to develop their own players. Maybe Perth are in a shout with that, but I don't think Tony Sage has the cash to be throwing an extra $4.5 million towards that team. The only other team I could see it working for would be an expansion side as an initial marquee player. But again, I think the league itself has evolved beyond this marquee period. I don't think we're ever going to see a period because we don't have the caliber of Socceroo internationally to bring back, like the Kules and Emmerdens that season, because there isn't that much... I don't think there's that big an ageing population looking at Australia as being the last paycheck anymore, with the advent of Chinese Super League, the advent of the Indian Super League, all that sort of stuff. If those things existed in 2012, Del Piero would have gone there. He wouldn't have come here. That's just the reality of the finances of the situation. I don't think we get Ono. I don't think we get Heskey. I think that global market's changed, and I think more A-League clubs are looking to bring players in who maybe have played in Asia and have that experience to then sell back to Asia if they're playing well again, or players from Europe who are looking to make an easier transition to an English-speaking nation in Asia with a view that they may make a jump across to another high-paying side in India or China or someone like that. So I think we've gotten past that model, but I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love to see him in the league. He'd be great for the league. We need more star names and star power. I don't think you're going to get more than 100 Mexicans at each game. But like, if you can find a way to engage with an active football community that it's not already watching football in some capacity, then you'd be crazy not to. It wouldn't shock me, Carlos Vela or not, if we see 3 or 4 more Mexican internationals signed in the A-League next season, just based on what we've learned from the De Villa effect playing in Australia this year. And also, like, why don't Mexicans migrate to New Zealand? Why is this a thing that's only happened once they're in Wollongong? Someone's going to have to explain to me the Mexican diaspora, and let me know on Twitter or in the comment section below. But yeah, it will be interesting to see. Great player. Would love to see him here. I don't think it's super likely. And from memory, I think Drogba and Essien and a couple of players in the past have also signalled a desire to come to Australia that never really came to fruition. And maybe this is just one of those obstacles.
Yeah, I can tell you that Vela would sell a ton of jerseys, and that would bring some money in. He's the number one selling jersey player for LAFC. Is on all the marketing, on all the branding.
It's a good kit though. Like, you're wearing one of the kits right now, aren't you?
Yeah. So this
we don't do that. We don't do good kits.
2018-19 away kit. You can still get some of these if you want. Fanatics International, I believe, still has some, and I believe MLS Store still has some. I love the LAFC kits. I can't get enough of them. I just need the finances to get this season's kits, because this new the 2021 away kit looks absolutely amazing. But go check that out at MLS Store. It looks amazing. What we might do now is we might take a quick 2-minute break, and then we'll come back in and we'll jump straight into the A-League. All right, everyone, and we are back. So we're going to jump into Brisbane Roar versus MacArthur FC. This was a 2-1 win for the Roar. This game took place in Campbelltown, didn't it? Yes, it did. I'm losing my mind over here. This was a dominant performance by the Roar from what I remember of this game. I thought that I don't know what's happened with MacArthur, but they just haven't looked as good as they did start the season the last couple of weeks. I know they've been very much an up and down team this season, but they seem to be more on the downswing lately than they do the upswing. Shaun, what did you think of this game?
Yeah, if MacArthur's a legitimate top 4 side or even a top 6 side, because it is pretty tight, these are the sort of games they must be winning at home to teams that are out of form. I thought MacArthur flattered Brisbane as well. I don't think it was necessarily like a return to form for Brisbane or anything like that. It was more, I think MacArthur gave them too much, and they gave them too much that was going to be effectively, I thought, the difference makers between the two sides. For MacArthur, in possession, I find them very one-dimensional, and I don't think they're not playing like a free-flowing style. Like, they'd rather play a nice, pretty triangle of passes than get a direct ball for someone to go in behind, unless Lockie Rose is on, or Michael Rausch, or however you pronounce that. If they're on the park, they will try and release them early, but like, Brisbane still, this was kind of two sides that really didn't want to win the game, if that makes sense. Neither of them was playing super effectively to go out there and win the match. It was Brisbane's best performance in the last month, absolutely, but I think MacArthur gave them the ball in all the wrong areas. I thought Dan Zaki, who's on the screen at the moment, was fantastic. Scott Neville, remember him? He's back and apparently playing A-League football for Brisbane, which I'd completely forgotten about. Dylan Winslow-Hall's got a great goal as well. Like, so there were signs there for Brisbane that were good. Dan Zaki and Halls, I think, are key to their top 6 aspirations. They need Halls to hit double figures in terms of goals this season. If they've got any hope, they need Danzaki to really start pulling the strings from that number 10 free role that he gets. Otherwise, like, I don't really know how much depth is actually there. They had been, it looked like they were treading water until Scott McDonald came back. He came back, he got injured again, so they're going to be without him again for a little while. They really need to find... I think, to find exactly what their preferred style of football is and get some consistency in that shape, consistency in that team, consistency in their performances. That's the key for Brisbane now. MacArthur, they are, despite being top 4 on -1 goal difference, I think they beat Adelaide 4-0 as well in that kind of spell. So that's really the one game where they've really put their foot down and really smashed a team. They need to find a way to turn possession into actual opportunities and chances. If they don't, then like they're at real risk, I think, of fading away in the second half of this season. We spoke about a couple of weeks ago, Stephen. What teams did we think would potentially drop out of that top 6 if teams like Western United, Perth Glory, Brisbane, whoever else were going to pick up points and make that leapfrog into that spot. And if Macarthur really don't start kind of getting some consistency to their form, I could absolutely see them being one of the teams that drops out of that period. We'll talk through the ladder a little bit in a moment, but at the present, the second to sixth sides, and I've probably butchered that, are only separated by 3 points. So this is a huge loss for Macarthur in terms of the overall table sitting. It was only a couple of weeks ago we were talking about them potentially catching Central Coast, and now it's really they're going to start looking over their shoulder at what teams could potentially overtake them with games in hand and all that sort of stuff. But more on a couple of sides that I think are in that same boat where their form is starting to slip away and they really need to start putting results together to get that buffer back between the top six and the chasing pack.
Yeah, I think what may save Macarthur is the fact that those sides that are sitting just outside the six at the moment are not looking too good either, and so they're not so two of those sides this week, Western United and Perth Glory, both had prime opportunities to pick up at least a point, if not multiple points, that they probably should have, which would have put a lot of pressure on a team like Macarthur, and failed to do so. And we'll dissect those teams in depth shortly. I want to talk about Dylan Wenzel-Halls for a second. He's only 23. Does he go to France with the Olyroos?
That's a good question. I would say yes. I don't know if he starts, though. So I don't think he'd be in the starting lineup, but I think he's definitely in the squad. I'd put him ahead of D'Agostino, who gets opportunities all the time for the Olyroos, but I don't know if I'd put him ahead of either of the Tourés or Yengi or any of one that Adelaide's really uncovering at the moment. I don't know if I'd even put him ahead of Moody Najjar, who came off the bench in this game briefly for Macarthur. So, yeah, I think he goes. I don't know if he starts, though. I think that's an interesting prospect. I think he is, of those 4 or 5 players I've just mentioned, the most one-dimensional, if that makes sense, where if you can get him in behind, fantastic. If he can isolate defenders in 1v1 situations, fantastic. But if you take him to Tokyo, is that what you're talking about, the Olympics?
So the Olyroos are playing the tournament in France at the end of the season, at the same time that the Socceroos are doing their World Cup qualifiers, which will see an exodus of about 30 plus players from the A-League, and I have written an article on that if you want to go check it over at the website. The reason I mentioned Dylan Wenzel-Halls by name is he's having a great season, and Brisbane are the only team in the A-League who have not had a Socceroos or an Olyroos player inside either of those squads in the last couple of years. This could be Brisbane's first chance to have a player inside that squad, in one of those squads, and I think he starts. I think that they want a good option up front, and I think because of injuries to certain players, you mentioned the Torre brothers, I think that Wenzel-Halls will find himself in a start in at least one of those games if he's selected for either the squad that goes to France, or he ends up in the actual squad that goes to Tokyo.
He'll end up getting left out for Trent Bahaja because it's Graham Arnold.
Well, Bahaja's only just come back from injury.
Yeah.
I think I actually ruled Bahaja out when I wrote my article because of the injury. Same as I ruled out Chris Economides. Of at least, I'm just talking about the France squad here, not necessarily Tokyo, because that's still 3 more months away. But I ruled both Bahaja and Economides out because they've only just come back from injuries, both of them. And I don't think 4 weeks is enough time for them to play themselves into form, especially Bahaja, because of the way that Corrick is using the youth players at the moment.
I just mean more that he's a Sydney FC player, and we know Graham's obvious bias in that area. Look, I would take him.
No. Sydney conspiracy here. Graham Arnold won't select any Sydney FC players because he wants Sydney FC to win the league. You gotta play the metagame here, Shaun.
They'll be out of the running by that stage. They'll be lucky to make finals. I'd take him 100%. I think he is in the top 3 young strikers in the division. I don't know if he starts, though. I think based on... He's at a Brisbane side that's not that great. Yeah, and that's... Please don't savage me on that, Brisbane fans. I think you will make the 6, but they're not that great. I don't think he would start he wouldn't start at Sydney FC. He wouldn't start at Melbourne City. He probably would start at Melbourne Victory because they're still persevering with Gestato when he's fit. or just dead, and Ben Falami and whoever else. Yeah, I don't like. I would 100% take him. I don't know if he starts though, so maybe that hoodoo that you're talking about for Brisbane gets broken.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. A triple header on Saturday. I didn't see this one coming in, to be honest, and it could just be because it was Newcastle versus Melbourne Victory that kicked us off. The two wooden spoon contenders. I completely didn't even realize it was a 3:00 kickoff. 2-1 was the final here. Melbourne Victory picking up a rare victory this season over a struggling Newcastle side who just can't seem to catch a break no matter how well they actually play. I thought Victory were very lucky to get away with this in the end, and I think that a 1-1 or a 2-2 result, like a draw, would have been apropos, not only the way that both sides are playing this season, but the way this game played out. How did you see it, Shaun?
Yeah, I thought Newcastle lost the game more than Victory won it, if that makes sense. Newcastle had a bunch of chances, but sometimes I think Newcastle, after this match, had 7 straight defeats, and I'm happy to be corrected on Twitter on the comment section below. They didn't look like a team who remembered how to win. Like, even their goal was quite scrappy, but they dominated the first half. They were well on top. Victory came out of the blocks a little bit in the second half, but again, like, this wasn't as great as this season has been. There's been a couple of games over the past 7 days or so that haven't quite lived up to the hype in terms of quality, and this was definitely one of them. Victory desperately needed the win. I think it's their first away points this season, and only their 3rd win of the season as well. So, like, they were desperate for those 3 points. They drew a level with that with Newcastle Jets at time of this match being played, just behind them by goal difference. So it was a huge one for them in terms of avoiding the wooden spoon. But yeah, for me, 100%, Newcastle should have won this game. They should have been comfortably, I think, 2 or 3-0 up at half time, not 1-0 up to a scrappy goal. It's just one of those things in football. When the tide's against you, when you're not playing well, when you're not picking up points, when you're not getting wins, they become harder and harder to get. So I think if this game was played again in a week's time, maybe Newcastle do actually get up, but you've got to give Victory credit. And I think it was Leighton Brooks, the youngster, who got the winner for them. So hopefully in the second half of the season for Victory, we'll see more of that young talent, that young Melbourne-based or Victorian talent coming through in their squad to hopefully start building towards something for next season and beyond, because effectively they're just playing for pride for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're still fighting. At least they're showing that grit. They're showing that can-do attitude. They're showing they're not going to go down without a fight, and that's really all. That's really all you can ask from a Newcastle side that's kind of in limbo. And we discussed this a couple of weeks ago here on the weekend recap. I don't know. I think that this was a game that just sort of played out the way it played out. Like I said, I think this game deserved to end in a draw, but I don't think any result was necessarily a bad one in this game. Like, it easily could have been a Newcastle win. It easily could have been a draw, and as we saw, it ended up in a Melbourne victory. Crucial 3 points for Melbourne's season. Maybe this gets them off the wooden spoon. Or it at least comes handy in the fight down the track and gets Victory where they need to go in terms of, I guess, building towards next season. So yeah, I don't know. I think I've said all that's needed to be said on this game. We'll move on to the 5:00 game, featuring our two sides who played out a 1-1 draw. I know Shaun had quite a bit to say on Sydney's goal from Costa Barbarouses in the 58th minute. That was I've just noticed the caption. It's not a fucking replay. I hate the use of this terminology, this replay, these rematches. It is not. It is just last season's grand finalists facing off.
Yeah, but it's in Sydney. It's in Sydney, so it's the actual replay this time.
This is a hill I will die on. I don't die on many hills, but this is one I will die on. This is exactly the reaction I was expecting when I put it in there as well. You've got me good.
So should I walk everyone through it? So if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be proven wrong, right? Like for Sydney FC's goal, for those of you the guys that didn't see it, Curtis Good, both his feet were behind the line. A ball came towards him, he cleared it. Anybody, wherever you're sitting, wherever you happen to be right now, try and lift your leg without naturally, because of the biomechanics of your body, moving it forward so it's in front of you. Right? You can't really raise your leg and your knee and your foot because of the way it bends, the way it pivots you can't lift it straight up into yourself like a turtle. You have to move it forward for that to happen. None of the angles that anybody could see on the camera showed that it actually crossed the line. We don't have Hawkeye here in Australia, obviously. The 3 Fox angles, I think they knew that they didn't have one that definitively provided proof, so they started focusing on Curtis Good's feet, and they immediately moved beyond it because obviously Fox Sports are above and beyond criticism this season as far as their own broadcast is concerned. They don't critically look and say, oh, I wish we had another angle of that. They just barrel on through and move on past it. We've seen it with VAR decisions. We've seen it with whatever else. If it ends up being a goal, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I completely understand that portion. My frustration more comes from that no one could provide any evidence in the course of that game, be it the linesman or the official in the middle or any of the Fox Sports people to say, here is an angle that definitively shows this ball crossing the line, which is the most basic rudimentary thing that every game should have access to. If you can't, that's the one thing that you have to get right. I don't care if VAR disappears or whatever else, but you have to have the ability to be able to tell when a ball has crossed the line for a goal. That's the entire point of the match. It's the entire point of the game. Yep. If you remember back to the 2010 World Cup, and I'm probably showing my age or getting it wrong, Frank Lampard's ghost goal against Germany, there was uproar about goal line technology needing to be brought in to try and resolve that. And then everywhere else in the world it has. It seemed like an obvious one to me, and it didn't even go to VAR or anything like that. They didn't look at it in slow motion and make a decision. They just gave the goal in real time. Fox Sports had no interest in talking about it any further, and they barreled on to the rest of it. So, coincidence that it's Sydney FC? I don't think this is actually part of the conspiracy or the FFA bias or Sydney bias or whatever else. But my frustration comes from key and pivotal moments in games that we can't actually go and definitively say yes or no with. And that's the big frustration, is that we're not getting that quality of support and that quality of viewership.
Yep, I completely agree with this. I think I responded to you on Twitter with this. I don't think it was so much... I just think it was a situation where, because it was given on field, there was no evidence to overturn it. And I think that's literally all it is. And I don't... And you can criticize the living shit out of Fox Sports for this. I've done so hard not to swear throughout the previous 6, 8, 2 months, whatever, however long we've been doing this version of the weekend recap, and I'm just letting it all out tonight.
I swear every week, so I don't know what you're worried about.
Yeah, I know. I try to maintain professionalism. Fuck that. This week I'm just letting it all out. So I think this is just a case of Fox Sports aren't providing enough camera angles. Look, I want VAR to go as much as the next person. I've changed my mind on that multiple times. I think if you just looking at it from a cost perspective, I think one of the reasons that's the only reason we don't have goal line tech is it's something like 200. I think this was quoted as something like 200,000 per set of goalposts, and it would mean that there's no games able to be played in regional grounds or anything like that, which just seems like a stupid reasoning. Get rid of VAR, have goal line tech. That's all we need at the moment, because it's clear and obvious that the broadcast isn't up to standard, and we're just going to keep having decisions like this happen on a semi-regular basis, which just brings about confusion, frustration, and it gives us something to talk about. But it's just, we need to get this right, because this game could have very, very easily been 3 points for City if this goal wasn't awarded. If we have a definitive angle to let it go.
But then, by the same token that I'm kind of saying, it's shitty that we can't prove this definitively, you just be on the other side of the, seat this time saying it's shitty that we can't definitively prove that it did cross the line. You know what I mean? We'd be arguing different sides of the same coin and the same decision making. And that's not a difficult thing to expect your broadcast partner to have more than the 3 camera setup, to have camera visibility of the goal line itself so that we get some sort of depth of field from a side angle as to where Curtis Good has stood and where the ball has gone to. Like,
so one thing that MLS does incredibly well is they have the goal camera. So there is a camera inside the uprights, or it's on the little pole that sits just outside the back of the netting. I don't remember exactly where it sits, but there's a camera that shows you inside the goal. Now, it would have given you the angle from behind, or at like a 45-degree angle to where Curtis Good was, but it might have shown a little bit more than what we have now. I can't imagine. So the AFL, and sorry to cut you off there, the AFL also has cameras inside its uprights. So are you telling me it is that hard for Fox Sports to get a camera stuck inside the uprights to show us the side-on angle of the line? That would have saved the entire thing.
Yeah, so they used to have it in the top corner. I don't know if this is showing my age again. One of the first goals in the A-League scored by Noel Spencer. He smashes it into the top corner, and they broke a GoPro. And it was one of the first images, one of the kind of iconic images in the first seasons of the A-League, was him absolutely blasting the ball into the top corner, and it's smashing the little GoPro that they had up in the corner. Football Chaos, youtube.com/football chaos. Go and check out a guy named Steve's fantastic work. He films a lot of different community games in and around Victorian football. He does some fantastic stuff. He's just got little GoPros sat in the corner of each goal, and you see everything. He films it at halfway. He's got GoPros in each goal mouth, and that's it. Like, you can tell from his amateur level most weeks if a ball's crossed the line definitively or not. And we could have used that in this setup and in this build, but we don't have it. Like, we're at a point now where we're talking about amateur people on YouTube who are giving us a greater broadcast quality and a greater field of vision for the games than the actual supporter and the actual broadcaster that's getting paid $40 million to broadcast women's football and is getting paid however much each season to be broadcasting the A-League at the moment. So just crazy. And it's the wrong thing to talk about because this was a good game. Like both sides had different passages of play where they looked like they were on top. I think Sydney over the course of the 90 probably just shaded that in terms of overall pressure on the ball and overall pressure in the final third. Again, very tense finish. Jamie McLaren, I don't know what he has running through his veins, but it's not regular human stuff that 98th minute he can smash a penalty top corner like that. But a fascinating contest. And for whatever reason now, because of this again, we're having to talk about all the wrong stuff relating to it, when what we should be saying is this potentially a grand final preview? City still have games in hand on Central Coast. They could potentially move top in the derby next week or this coming weekend, this Saturday. Sydney FC have now snuck their way into third position, are still not playing, I think, their best brand of football and still not hitting their top gear, but they are picking up points and they are starting to get separation from that chasing pack. So, yeah, a fascinating contest, a tense one, arguably a finals preview for wherever both these teams finish. It's just a shame that we're now focusing on the other elements of it, which is interesting to me. Did you think it was a penalty from your perspective?
100%. I was genuinely surprised upon seeing the first replay that Alex King didn't give it in real time.
Yeah,
I mean, in real time. So first up, I thought this is 100% a pen. I think I said immediately. Well, so for both these goals, I said immediately they're getting both these calls. They're getting called back immediately. So I thought that live that Costa's goal was getting called back, and then obviously it didn't. And then I thought Sydney's copping the pen here. I thought it immediately. I want to talk about the lead up to that. So it's a turnover from Ivanovic. We all know that I'm a huge rap for Luka Ivanovic. I think he's got great potential as a player. This was a rookie mistake by the young kid. I'm getting a little bit annoyed at Sydney fans making him a scapegoat for half of Sydney's problems at the moment, because it's not just Ivanovic, it's Sydney's front line as a whole. No one seems to be able to finish. It's taking scrappy goals like Costa's. It's taking little tap-ins. I mean, Bobo's had 2 or 3 goals since he's come back, and I probably should have looked that up.
2, I think.
And one of them was a little Happy Gilmore style. Just tap it in.
Yeah.
Just tap it in.
So 5 draws, 4 defeats. In any of those games, do you think you could have picked up more points if you had a more routine finisher? Or is this just showing, you think, from this again, fan perspective, not host perspective, do you think this is just kind of glossing over how much Adam Lafondra bailed you out in previous seasons?
I don't want to say Lafondra bailed us out. I think Lafondra made a more complete unit. the same way that Bobo, first time around, made a more complete unit when you add in Mijayevsky. Before that, it was Holosko.
Yeah, I think you drop Mijayevsky. I think Mijayevsky goes into any team and makes them a more complete unit. He was fantastic.
So I think it's a case of you're looking at the players who are just not necessarily cracking over or painting over the cracks, which is what's happening at the victory.
I wonder, and I'm keen to get your perspective on this. I wonder if I haven't seen the stuff about Ivanovic being a scapegoat, to be completely honest. I know Bahaja made his return. I can't remember who started the game, which is my own fault. But I wonder if
it was Bobo and Costa.
Yeah, I think what if like a lot of that blowback on Ivanovic is because Patrick Wood, who I think personally in all the Sydney games I've watched this season, I haven't seen them all, I think every time he's played, he's been effective in either just creating opportunities for other people, creating space, whatever else. I think he's a real talent. And I think the frustration within the fan base, if I was a Sydney FC, trying to put my Sydney FC perspective on it, would be that he's not getting those starting opportunities that Ivanovic has gotten. And he's not getting that 30-minute cameo. He's getting like garbage minutes at the end of games. You've talked about Tilio over the last couple of weeks, like getting garbage minutes at City. He's got a goal and an assist now in the last 2 weeks. A winning goal against Wellington Phoenix, now a match-winning assist for the penalty to like equalise in the 98th minute. He's scored at the NPL level as well. Like, surely he's a player that's knocking on the door now, trying to get more minutes and more game time and starting opportunities. Unfortunately, Noon, Naboot and McLaren are all playing pretty well at the moment, which is a tough ask. But, like he should be getting more opportunity. I wonder if the Sydney FC fan base aren't necessarily looking at Luka Ivanovic as being the issue, but if they know that there's only so many minutes to be given to youngsters, that they'd rather see like more development, more time being put into someone like Patrick Wood, who I think is a very special player. And if we're talking about like Bolter, Ollie Roos, I'd 100% have Patrick Wood in that group, ahead of Yangi, probably ahead of one of the Toure brothers, probably ahead of Nick Diagasca, maybe not ahead of Wenzel Halls just yet, but I think he's a fantastic talent. But do you think that's where the frustration comes from?
I think that's only where some of it lies. I think from the fans' perspective, Sydney FC just want a finisher. I think that's all they want. I think they want a out and out number 9, someone who can just stick into the back of the net at will. You mentioned it was 5 draws, 4 losses, I think you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I would have to have a look back at Sydney's here. So, and I'm looking at there now, the way they've played out this season. So there's been a lot of 1-goal games, which, if I'm looking at that, I think you can turn some of those 1-goal losses into draws if you have a Lafondra. And I think you can turn a lot of those draws into wins if you have a Lafondra. I think there were a lot of chances, and I'm simply going off memory here, I think there were a lot of chances in a lot of games that just weren't able to be capitalised on, whether it was Costa missing from open play, whether it was... And that Brisbane game comes to mind, the 1-1 game. Costa missed 2 sitters in the opening 10 minutes. If that's Lafondra taking those chances, at least one of them's hitting the back of the net. I think there's a lot of games that will just... the Adelaide game is a perfect example now. That's a game that Sydney should have gone down to 9 in, and didn't. But by hook, by crook, Adelaide deservedly got the win, even if it was by a penalty. And we had our discussion on this. I don't think it was a pen, but that's a discussion that we've already had. I think you could possibly look at that as a 1-1 game for Sydney. One of those losses into a draws. If you got a Lafondra finishing all the chances that an Ivanovic had, that Popo had, that Costa had in that game. Costa played that one. He didn't play the previous game against Perth. That game against Perth, perfect example. How many times did they stick it at Liam Reddy, who played out of his skin? Lafondra probably sticks one of those in the top corner. It's just... I think they just need a finisher, and the A-League transfer window opening creates opportunity, perhaps, but I just don't think the money's there, which is why they didn't have Lafondra in the first place. This is why they sent him on loan to India, is because they didn't have the money, and the only side that could pay it that was willing to pay it was the side in the ISL. So,
interestingly, we have seen a few players start to come back from ISL. Stephen Taylor, Joel Chianese, who played this tonight, like that. We are getting some short-term deals. So, Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, Sydney, in the next couple of weeks. It wouldn't shock me.
3-month contract for Lafondra.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if there's an injury replacement deal or some players released in the transfer window to go back to NPL football to try and create some cap space. But yeah, you'd have to think that they'd need a fair chunk of cap space to get him back in. And again, I'm not 100% sure on what Sydney FC's scenario is with marquees and stuff as well. So yeah, that'll be a fascinating one to kind of figure out how they're going. He is technically on loan at Mumbai, not the other way around. Yep. So who knows what the scenario might actually end up being in the next few weeks. But hopefully they do. Hopefully the Sydney FC fan base calms down because they are sitting in third and they could potentially jump into the top two very quickly the way that the Mariners are going.
I think you have to look at the fact that this game against Adelaide coming up this weekend is going to be incredibly crucial from that perspective because both teams are tied on 26 points, Sydney with a +5 goal differential over Adelaide. 3 points over... Oh, sorry. They're tied 3 ways with MacArthur, who are also on 26, that -1 goal differential. And we'll talk more about the latter there. But that gives the opportunity for Sydney to put 3 points on their next closest targets this Saturday against Adelaide, one of whom they're directly playing. It's essentially the classic 6-point game that everyone talks about.
It's almost a 9-point game because Adelaide still has a game in hand. So that 3-point variance kind of takes away that advantage and their goal difference is better as well. But does that actually segue into Adelaide nicely?
Yes, it does. Adelaide and Western Sydney. I didn't even realise I was setting us up for that.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. I love it. What the hell what the Wanderers doing here? Holy shit. 1-1. There's the swearing again. 1-1 was the final score here. Both teams ended up with 10. Tommy Urish opened the scoring here in the 11th minute. A second yellow card for Louis Dorigo here in the 45th. Saw him go off just before half-time. Simon Cox netted it in the 68th minute before a straight red to Mark Natter for clear denial of goal-scoring opportunity. Saw this game end 1-1 with 10 apiece. Western Sydney had plenty of chances to seal this game late, both before and after Mark Natter got sent off. I only ever thought there was one team winning this, and I thought that was Adelaide, even after the red card. Adelaide, Brian Strain created a beautiful chance. It was the 52nd minute and missed an open net because he had to take it on the right foot as opposed to the left foot and wasn't able to hook the angle back. If he'd have taken that on the left foot, I'm guessing the fact he took it on his right is because the left is the weak foot, and Shaun, you'd probably know about this from Football Manager. I think had he been able to get over onto the left foot, that hits the back of the net, and it's 2-0 Adelaide, 10 men down, park the bus for the remaining 40 minutes. I don't think Western Sydney even hit the back of the net.
I've got a bad left foot at a Sunday league level, so like I forget Football Manager. That's just a real life thing. Like I get that entirely. I don't think Western Sydney's brand of football is that good, and I don't know if I'm the only person that feels that way. Like, don't get me wrong, there are elements of Western Sydney soccer Twitter that are as delusional as any fan base across the division and across the league. So like I'm not throwing them all in the same basket. There are some great members in there as well, but like I think they're starting to figure out as well that like Carl Robinson's plan A isn't that great. I think the Mark Natter red card is the first time we've seen them at any point this season not play with the back three and 2 wing backs. They just keep persevering with that formation, whether it benefits them or not. I think teams have figured out how to play against it. I think teams have figured out how to play against them. And I think teams are figuring out where to hold their line to kind of take away Western Sydney's greatest asset, which is Duke and Abini in transition. So I think Western Sydney, they've played 17 games now, the most in the division. They are sitting in 6th spot. They've got Brisbane behind them who've only played 14. They've got Western United behind them who've only played 14. They will be, I think, the most panicked team about games in hand at the moment because those teams now can leapfrog them and leapfrog them by a couple of points. It wasn't that long ago where we were talking about Melbourne City and Western Sydney playing each other on a Friday night to potentially go top of the division. That's how tight the league is at the moment, and that's how quickly fortunes turn. Western Sydney now have got 1 win in their last 5, and they've had 3 consecutive draws. And in those draws, I personally feel they could have lost all those games because they're not playing like a fantastic brand of football, and they've got the talent to do it. Like, I think their fan base has said at various points that they needed a number 10. They got James Tracy. They needed a number 9. They've got Mitch Duke, who arguably could get into any A-League side on form. They have all the tools that they're going to get this season. I think they've still got a Ugarkovic-sized hole. Apparently, they're now maybe going to get Ugarkovic as well, if they can wrangle some magic stuff there with their salary cap.
I think Ugarkovic is going to help the Wanderers at the moment.
No,
I think
that's where I'm going with it. Like, I 100% don't think he's going to solve their issues either. Like, I just don't think they're playing a good enough brand of football to be successful in this league. I think it's too defensive, and I think it's not proactive enough in possession. They've got so many talented wingers. Like, I think Nikolai Mueller is a fantastic player. I think Bruce Kamau has had an excellent season, but they're continuing to persevere, trying to make them number 10s and forwards and whatever else, because they are so rigid in this tactical structure that they have to play a 5-3-2 at all times, and that they're not going to move away from it no matter if their opposition goes down to 10 men, no matter if they are chasing a game, no matter if they've conceded 3 goals. Like, they just don't change anything, and that's got to be the biggest frustration for the Wanderers fans. On current form, unless they change something, or unless somebody in that team like starts to really pick up a rich vein of scoring form or a rich vein of just play in general, I think they're most likely to drop out of the top 6 at the moment. Them and MacArthur, those are my 2 at the moment, that I think their form is starting to fade and they're really not picking up the points they need at a crucial time in the overall race. And teams like Brisbane, teams like Western United would be absolutely licking their lips at the moment, thinking Western Sydney's the team that we're going to leapfrog. That's how we get our way back into the top 6.
So you mentioned 1 win in the last 5. That win came against Wellington Phoenix in a crazy Monday night thriller. A game that almost ended 4-4 draw had it not been for half an inch of an offside, which the right decision, and we've talked about this before. But they were that close to being 4 points out of the last 15 and a win that they still would have been in 6th the way things played out, but they could have been winless in the last 5. You know, it's... I don't know what the solution is for Western Sydney. You know, we talked about that 5-3-2, and Carl Robinson seems completely committed to that 5-3-2.
So just on that, like 10 games into the season, they had the best defensive record. They had the fewest goals conceded. 17 games into the season, they're now in like the bottom 5 in terms of goals conceded. 24 goals conceded, 26 scored. Like, they're not... What was working for them, their defensive solidity in that shape, has disappeared. So like, now they need to change and tweak something elsewhere, because they just don't, like, they try and get out quickly, and if Duke and Abini get out fast and get like Nambra's advantages in transition, they can hurt teams. They absolutely can. But if they don't, like, what are they doing then? Like, what's the plan B? What's the second phase of attack? What's the third phase of an attack to try and work different spaces and work different opportunities, other than flicking a ball out to Wilmering or flicking a ball out to Russell and hoping that they beat a man and get a good cross in? Like, they're just not that great. Adelaide won't be that dismayed by this result. For them as a young team to play 45 minutes with 10 men, albeit I think the last 15 or so, the other team was 10 men as well. Yeah. But to get through that match and their shape and structure be sound enough that they actually could get something out of that game, I think they'll look at as being a positive. But in the overall makeup of a season, I think they desperately would have wanted the 3 points as well. The contest that you've already mentioned against Sydney FC now becomes huge for Adelaide. If they win that game, they'll be above Sydney with a game in hand, potentially opening up a points differential. They need to keep pace with Melbourne City, who should, by all rights, beat Melbourne Victory this weekend and maybe go top of the league. And they desperately need to keep points with the Central Coast as well. So, yeah, look, two sides that aren't that far apart on the table, but the way that they're playing on the park at the moment, miles and miles between the two, which may even transition into our next game, if you wanted to throw to that one.
Yep. Let's do that. Wellington Phoenix, Western United, 3-2, the final here. A late winner for the Wellington Phoenix, and all is right with the world when Wellington Phoenix beat Western United, given the way that things played out during Western United's expansion and coaching. And that's the only mention we'll have of the coach. I think what stood out for me most this game was the fact that Fox fucked the broadcast again. There were a couple of cracking goals in this game, but yeah, I think that's just what's a couple of penalties. It was so Bessa Barisha opened the scoring 32nd minute with a penalty. Alexis Davia just before halftime, another penalty. Sotirio 53rd minute, 2-1. 2-2 for who was that? Guarashena, whose name I've completely butchered because I'm terrible with names.
That sounded good.
In the 56th minute, Ben Wayne, the winner, with it's in the 90th minute. Yeah, I think what stood out most for me in this game was actually, two things: Fox bundling the broadcast and the fact that Andrew Durante tried to contest the clearest handball ever and yelling at the ref, and probably should have copped a card for dissent the way he went off of that referee. You've got the caption there. Who even is Sam Sutton? So tell us, Shaun, who is Sam Sutton?
So the meme-worthy moment, he's given us a few this season, was Besart Berisha having a bit of a run-in with the teenage left-back, making, I don't know if it was his debut, but certainly like one of his first starts in his career for the Wellington Phoenix at left fullback. And he said they had some clash of coming together, and you could very audibly hear Berisha turn to him and say, like, who even are you? Or like, who even is that? Or something like that. But he'll definitely know the name now because Sam Sutton bobbed up with fantastic assist in the 90th minute for Ben Wayne's winner. So another one that's kind of come through that Wellington Phoenix Football Academy, the likes of Wayne, the likes of Sutton, Kakache, Sarpreet Singh. They've had a few real gems come through that young player academy over in New Zealand. So yeah, another one that they've unearthed. I think it was a huge win for Wellington. The difficult part, and I'm sorry, Knicks fans, and I'm sorry to our Mexican contingent if they're listening in, I think they're leaving their run too late. So even with this win, they're on 18 points. They are 2 points behind Western United, who they played, but Western United have 2 games in hand on them to potentially jump that little bit further. Like 100%, if Phoenix had lost this match or it had been a 2-2 draw, I would probably be drawing a line through them as a team that I don't think can then make finals. Such is the difficulty in jumping up table positions at the moment. But they got that victory. Now what they need to do is get a consistent run of form. It's their second win in the last 5. They really need to go on a run and get like 3 or 4 more victories in a very quick turnaround of time if they have any chance, I think, of making the finals. And then if they do make the finals and can potentially either get late season or postseason games back in New Zealand in that travel bubble, anything could happen with the Phoenix. If they squeeze their way into the top 6 and get home matches, like, I really think they could cause some massive issues and a few boilovers here and there in the off season. Western United, yeah, go for it.
Go on. Sorry, go on.
Western United, I don't think they've picked up any points without Diamante in the side, and he again wasn't in the squad. So they need to come up with some sort of plan B that isn't centered around him either coming off the bench like he did against Melbourne City for their last win, or find a different way to set up your squad and set up your team when he's not in the squad that gets the best out of Guarachena, who you mentioned, that gets the best out of Berisha. They've got talent in the squad. It's how do they change and develop their game plan for when their star player isn't available, because at different points in this match I thought they looked relatively lost. Okay,
so I'm looking at the Phoenix's run home here. So they've got 9 games because they've already played 16. They play Western United twice. They play Adelaide twice. They play Brisbane Roar. They play Melbourne City. They play the Wanderers, and they play the Glory.
Can you just quickly before you go through that? Where's the Brisbane game? Where's the City game? Where's the Glory game?
So the Wanderers game is at Bankwest.
Yep.
The Melbourne City game is at in Melbourne, and the Brisbane game is in Brisbane.
And where's the Perth one?
They play Perth twice, home and away.
Okay.
They play Western United twice, home and away, and they play Adelaide twice, home and away. So I think that they can pick up some good points against Western United, which are directly above them. We've seen this result. I imagine that Diamante is going to play the game in just 9 days' time in Melbourne. So maybe not so much. The 2 games, the last 2 games of the season, Western United and Perth Glory, those are the potential games in New Zealand, and I think that would be huge. I think they get 6 points if they can play those games in New Zealand. I think just the momentum, the occasion, I think they'll rise to the occasion like a phoenix, rise up from the ashes and go after it.
I think they would be like, they'd be furious that they don't get to play Victory or Newcastle during that run home, and that one of their Perth games away in Perth, where Perth are a completely different side to away from home. So yeah, it's a big ask as far as like that list is concerned, I think.
It is, but I think that they can maul on a couple of teams there. I've mentioned Western United. we mentioned Brisbane as a team that needs to work out what they are, and I know they look good. They have looked good at home at points this season. I think if Wellington can take the game to Brisbane, that they might be able to sneak at least a point and take points off Brisbane, who are close to directly above them. I think that where they're going to feast on is against the team that played tonight in the Perth Glory, which transitions beautifully into our next game. Perth Glory versus Newcastle Jets. I don't even know what the hell this game was doing in Coffs Harbour. The stadium looks terrible. It's a giant field. I think if you were to make it a rectangular stadium proper, then this stadium would have looked amazing. I took one look at the broadcast and I'm like, how the hell are the fans even seeing anything from 50 meters away? It's just... But, I mean, I guess they kind of got what they deserved. A Dow 1-1 affair. Like, I full disclosure, I only watched the first half, and then I watched the highlights of the goals afterwards because I was traveling from work as this game was taking place in the second half. To me, I think that this game is enough for me to write the Glory off. I was somewhat confident that if they could get something out of this massive home stint they had coming up, and we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, I thought they needed to get 5 points out of this road trip. Sean, you thought they needed to get 6 points out of this trip up and down the coast. They've got just a single point. I think that I think this is enough for me to write the Glory off. They just don't seem to have that it factor at the moment. And I don't think playing home or away is going to change what's happening with the Glory at the moment.
No, and like, can you bring up there while I go through this? Can you bring up the their run home? But yeah, like this was arguably one of the more dour games of the season thus far, and maybe that's reflective of my mental state or more than anything else. But it just didn't have a lot. And again, like I said it about Newcastle for the victory game, like. Even when you're playing well and even when you're on top, if you haven't won games in that long, you can kind of forget how to win a football match and how to set yourself up for it. And to me, this looked like a game that both sides really were trying to avoid defeat in rather than actual wins. It was a penalty that got Newcastle back into it. I don't know if they would have scored if this game had been played for 4 hours in open play. Perth, congrats to Joel Chianese, basically his first touch back in the league. After only being announced as a Perth Glory player today, got them their go-ahead goal, some good work from Fornaroli and Keogh in the build-up. But again, Perth Glory just commit 4 men forward away from home and at home. I don't know how they keep looking at their lineup and looking at their squad and continuing after failing to get points away from home against everybody except Melbourne City, of course, and seeing that they don't need to change something and do something different. The crowd can carry you home in so many scenarios. In Perth, it can be a tough place to travel, given that it is like a 4-hour turnaround for lots of teams that do fly in the same day or fly out the same night or whatever else. So that is a huge advantage for them, but they still just try and do the exact same things at home, away from home, and it's not going to work. If you can't beat Newcastle away at the moment with the way their form's going, then you really need to have a look at how you're breaking down games, how you're creating opportunities that aren't just signing players that used to play for you, like Chianese. Congrats to Chris Economides, who made his return from ACL surgery. He's been out for over a year after doing that, I think February of last season. So congrats to him. Jason Gurria looks like a handy pickup for Perth. I don't know how they're not over the salary cap, to be completely honest, given the players that they've got in their squad, but it's so fragmented. They've got Langkamp and Lockman at the back, who look like good prospects. Now, Langkamp's been injured for most of his career. They need another central midfielder of quality to take it away. Kasuki Oda looks like a very good player, arguably already the best crosser in the league at left back. Gurria settles kind of the right back position, but they just look so incomplete because of the style and the way they set up and their tactical inflexibility. It makes them very easy to set up against because you know exactly what you're going to get. 2 up top, 2 out wide players are going to be out-and-out wingers that aren't going to defend that much. If it's Castro, it's a different story, but when you've got the likes of Armiento and an unfit Economides and whoever else trying to fill in wide positions, they're not the same prospects. So, yeah, I'm not far behind you. Have you got their run home? Let's have a look at their fixtures and see what they've got.
I do have their run home. It is at home to the Phoenix, away to Brisbane, home to Macarthur City, Victory, Western United, and the Western Sydney Wanderers. That home stretch is going to be crucial for them. If they can get... I think they need to get 15 points. I think they need 5 wins and against, I think the game that will stop them from doing that is the Melbourne City game. If they don't get 15 points there, like, you can kiss the season goodbye, because that's going to be the only way they do it. Then it's 3 games: Newcastle away, Wellington Phoenix away, and Macarthur at home again. Those games are all currently TBD because we're still waiting on the last few weeks of the schedule.
So they're on 15 games played. They're on 18 points. Let's say they get that 15 points. That only takes them to 33. I don't even think that's going to be enough to get top 6 this season, given how balanced the league is. 6th place is already on 25 points. Like, they are running out of time.
In the past, this would have been enough. That 30 to 40 point mark is somewhere around the middle there, would have been good. The problem, though, is that in most of those seasons where that was enough, you had teams running away with the league. So you had Sydney running away with the league. You had a top 2 a couple of seasons ago that was Glory and Sydney, both of whom amassed well over 50 points that year. Whereas this season has been a lot more even. And so I think, and you can see this as we transition beautifully into the ladder, that the points are really starting to rack up around the middle. Where did I put that ladder? I had the live one in front of me and I've completely
Do you want me to read it out while you find it?
Good, I've got it. So if you have a look at the middle of the ladder there, 8th through to 3rd are only separated by 6 points. There's a big log jam right in the middle there. In past seasons, as you mentioned, that where the Central Coast are now, like, that's at 30 points in first. That's kind of like the cutoff to make the 6 at a minimum. You really needed that 35, 40 points mark, and that's where the top of the league is right now. Whereas in past seasons, it was already at the 40 point mark at the top of the league, just because of how dominant teams were. So we'll go from bottom to top. 11 points in 12th are the Victory. 12 points in 11th are Newcastle. 18 points in 10th are the Glory. Same for the Phoenix, who are in 9th with a even goal differential. Glory -4. In 8th and 7th place are Western United and Brisbane Roar. Brisbane just the edge there with a +2 goal differential over Western United. Western Sydney hit the 6 by themselves, 25 points. Macarthur, Adelaide and Sydney all tied with 26 points goal differential, proving the break there. Macarthur 5th, Adelaide 4th, Sydney 3rd. Melbourne City in 2nd, all by themselves, 28 points. And Central Coast still on top of the table with 30 points. Looking ahead to the upcoming fixtures this week, I just want to quickly talk about a couple of these crucial fixtures. We've already mentioned Sydney and Adelaide are going to be a crucial fixture on Sunday afternoon. Macarthur play Newcastle in Campbelltown. That's going to be a crucial one for Macarthur. A chance to pick up what should be an easy 3 points to kind of keep them in touch with that top 6, or at least solidify their place in that top 6. Western Sydney and Brisbane, it's a battle of... Or really, Western Sydney need 3 points there to solidify themselves inside the 6. Brisbane need 3 points to get themselves back in touching distance of the 6. Western United, Central Coast Mariners, Saturday afternoon in Melbourne. Actually,
in Tasmania.
Might be,
in Tasmania.
Tasmania. That's right, I forgot about that Tasmania game. That's going to be a crucial one for the Mariners. A chance to pick up 3 points directly before the second place team plays in a Melbourne derby. Could, I don't want to say mess with Melbourne City's confidence, because I don't think it will. I think Melbourne City should handily win that game, given what they did last time to the Victory. But I think it'll just... I think not picking up 3 points here could do something to the Mariners. Because that'll knock them out of first spot if Melbourne City manage to pick up the win. And I think if Mariners leave first spot, I don't think they're going to get back into first spot. So Look, I want to see a grand final on the Central Coast, so Mariners need to pick up all the points they can. The Melbourne Derby intrigues me. Shaun, are you actually going to this one, or are you sitting on the sidelines again?
No, I'll be there, and if we lose, I'll never go to another one again in my life. But yeah, look, I don't think it'll be 6-0 again, because I think Victory, there's no way that they could allow that to happen. Like, even if they've just got 10 men sitting on the 18-yard box, I think their pride will get in the way. I think City will win it, but I think it'll be tighter than the previous one was. Even though Victory arguably are a weaker side now, they've let some players go inexplicably. The one that I'm waiting for you to get to is the one right down the bottom as we work through the list of upcoming fixtures.
The Glory and the Phoenix?
Yeah, I think if this fixture ends in a draw, then we put a line through both of them. I don't think either side, if that ends in a draw and they're both sitting on 19 points, I don't think either of them are going to make the finals. And I think we start, let's say hypothetically, right, we've put a line through Victory in Newcastle as not making the finals at this point. I think you start getting out that Sharpie and we start putting lines through Perth Glory and lines through Wellington, just because they don't have enough games to pick up the points they're going to need to hit that top six.
So you would essentially relegate it to 8 teams in contention for the finals.
Yeah, I would. And even then, that hypothetical of Western United's games in hand and Brisbane's games in hand, like that's not a guaranteed thing that they get into that top six. It would not shock. It wouldn't shock me if the top six right now stays that way at the end of the season.
Pick up the win against both those teams. You're looking at potentially. You're looking at least 6 points, potentially 8 between the top 6 and the bottom 6. Between top 6.
If they both lose, there will be 8 points between 7th and 6th spot, and I think that's a big gap.
Yeah, and those games in hand are running out for both teams.
Yeah.
So this could be the turning point of the A-League season. We don't know.
Could be a huge one.
Just make sure you tune in any way you can, and let's just hope that the broadcaster actually allows us to watch the games. That's it for this week. You can see all the links to the reserve team stuff at the bottom of the screen here. reserveteam.com.au, at reserveteamau on Twitter. I'm Steven Poletti. You can hit me up on Twitter at PolettiSteven if you want to talk football, Quidditch, ice hockey, talk about the Carlos Vela hype train that I'm leading at the moment. By all means, whatever. Shaun is at _FM on Twitter. Check him out on YouTube in the Mixer, who is still doing his Pentagon Challenge. Are you still in China at the moment, Shaun?
Still in China. Stuck in China for a while.
Still in China with plenty of Brazilians to go around. That's it for us for this week. Stay tuned to Twitter, where we will have an update on what the weekend recap is going to look like in the future, as we are looking at experimenting with a format change again. So stay tuned to details of that. But for now, I'm Steven Poletti, along with Shaun Mathieson. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you later.